Good evening. My name is Stacy LaCour with Mahomet Area Chamber of Commerce, and we want to welcome you tonight and thank you for viewing in to see what is actually a very important occasion. Tonight we have the pleasure of hearing directly from the candidates that are running for the Mahomet School Board. For everyone's safety, we do have the candidates socially distanced, and we've allowed each candidate to elect whether or not to wear their mask between questions. As a parent of two children that went through the Mahomet School District from kindergarten to high school, we have greatly benefited from their time, they greatly benefited from their time at the Mahomet schools, and now it further shows in how well they're doing at the next level. But it's that experience that makes me understand the importance of what we do tonight with our school board candidates and with our school board in general. The role of a school board member is important on so many levels, which is why it's critical for us to not only hear from them, but ask them questions that pertain to our lives and the lives of our children. Basically, tonight's schedule is going to go with we're going to meet with each of our candidates, allow them to give an opening statement. We've also have pre-submitted questions that they've studied and will be answering. But we also give you out there in our audience, live on YouTube and Facebook, the opportunity to, within the chat section, ask questions that will be then asked to the candidates. We have reserved time for that. So as you go through and as you hear things and something comes to mind, please feel free to pop something in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. So without further ado, let's start with opening remarks of our candidates. Our first candidate is Max McComb, the current school board president and member of the school board for about 14 years now. Max has been instrumental in many school board policies that have benefited our children greatly, but probably none better than Dogapalooza. Max?
Thank you, Stacy. Like Stacy said, my name is Max McComb. I was appointed to the board in 2007, and I have successfully run for re-election 3 times. My colleagues on the board elected me president in 2015. They take a vote on president every year, and they have re-elected me each of the 6 years past 2015. But I've been in Mahomet 30 years. A little bit about me, I guess. I sell residential real estate with RE/MAX Realty Associates. I run a successful individual real estate business. I'm a licensed real estate instructor. I mentor new agents, and I'm very active in both our local and our state realtor associations. My wife Ellen, we've been married 40 years now. She's an RN for Carl Broman over in Normal, Illinois. And we have one son named John. He attended Mahomet schools starting at kindergarten, graduated from Mahomet-Seymour. He lives now down in the St. Louis area, and he teaches K-5 PE in the inner city for St. Louis Public Schools. And last year, he was one of the St. Louis Public Schools Teachers of the Year, so we're pretty proud of that. He's married to our daughter-in-law, Nicole. Nicole is also a teacher. She teaches middle school language arts. And we have 2 super grandkids that we love to death. Emmett, who's 8 months old, and then his big sister Hayden, who just turned 3. So people have asked me, you know, you've done this a while, why in the world are you running again? What is possessing you to do this? And I've thought about that real hard, and I'll just share with you a little bit about why I'm running again. First of all, I'm very, very excited about the recent launch of our community engagement initiative that's called Bulldog Blueprint. We put that in place to help address facility issues, particularly the junior high, and I really want to see that project through. I'm excited to see what our community is going to say about facilities. Another reason is I'm very concerned about the current climate of the board and our community, specifically the desire of some of our newer board members to maybe micromanage and try to control teachers and staff. I want to see board member conduct that our community can be proud of, and most importantly, I take issue with and reject a narrative that's being propagated by some of the very loudest voices in our community right now that says our school district is broken and is in need of systemic change. I just don't agree with that. I have a desire to see our district continue to excel. I feel we need steady leadership at the board level and solid leadership by the superintendent and administrators, and of course, great teachers and great staff. I'm running because I want to see kids back in classrooms 5 days a week. And I'm running because I embrace traditional values that have brought us so much success here at Mahomet-Seymour schools. And that's me.
All right. The next candidate we get to meet tonight is Sonny Mcmurray. How can you not love the name Sonny Mcmurray? Sonny's a lifelong educator who has spent most of her recent years in the halls of Mahomet-Seymour as well as Champaign Unit 4 schools. Sonny lives in Mahomet with her husband Jim and their 3 children, all Mahomet school students. So she's got a very vested interest in what this meeting's about. Sonny?
First, I want to say thank you to Stacy, and I want to say thank you to the Chamber for hosting this. But I think I want to say thank you most of all to our community members who are actually tuning in and not watching the Illini game right now, because to compete with that would be very challenging. So thank you, and it's great to be in a community where people are so invested in our schools. It's a wonderful community to live in. I've been part of the community since 1999 when I was hired for my first teaching position at Sangamon Elementary School to teach first grade. And I was this 21-year-old kid straight out of college. My parents were 6 hours away, and I was just completely embraced by our staff at the school, by our teachers, and by the families I served. And to me, that was exactly what I wanted for my future and for the future of my children. So my husband Jim and I have raised our children in the community. We have 3 kids. We have a senior or a junior in high school. Oh my gosh, don't let me lose time already. We have a junior in the high school, we have a 7th grader at the junior high, and we have a 3rd grader at Lincoln Trail. Our kids have gone to the Mahomet-Seymour schools all the way through. We had one who started through the pre-K program at Middletown, and we had 2 who just started in kindergarten. I am a lifelong educator, as Stacy mentioned. I've taught 1st, 2nd, and 5th grades here in Mahomet, and I've also taught and am currently teaching in Champaign. I'm an instructional coach and interventionist at Robeson Elementary School. In between, because of my advanced degrees in education, I have a degree in curriculum and instruction and in educational organization and leadership, I was asked to come and teach at the University of Illinois College of Education. So I worked closely with our pre-service educators, getting them prepared for teaching kids how to read. And then from there, I worked in some administrative positions there to oversee early childhood and elementary programming. I would be honored to serve on the board in the capacity of somebody who's really passionate about public education. So when we are having conversations about the reality of schools, I would not only have the vision of what is actually allowed in public schools, but also the vision of what it is that teachers would be capable of and would be feasible in a classroom. I'm really excited to be here tonight. I'm really looking forward to having even deeper conversations with these incredible people sitting at this table. And I can honestly say that I feel like our community has some really great choices when it comes to who to vote for Board of Education. Thanks, Stacy.
Thanks, Sonny. And see, I knew all that about her. I just didn't know how to say it. Yeah, so brings a wealth of educational knowledge. Next is Justin Lamb, who again is not a foreigner to the school district. Lives in Mahomet with Alisa. Sorry, Alisa. A lifelong Mahomet resident, and their 3 children, and their kids span junior high, Lincoln Trail, and Middletown. Justin's also served in other capacities within the school as a vice president of the Mahomet School Board, the Mahomet Baseball Club Board. So just a little bit of what he's done. Justin?
Well, good evening. Thank you, Stacy, and hello to everyone that's joining us. If anybody wants to send updates on the Illini game, that'd be great. Very happy to be here this evening, and a little bit about me is I began working at the Mahomet IGA back in 1992. That's how I broke into the Mahomet community. Quickly fell in love with all the people in town, and just a great opportunity to work for Chuck. Everybody knows Chuck in Mahomet, I feel. And he was a great mentor to me while I was at the IGA and just taught me a lot of valuable life lessons. From working at the IGA, I began to meet a lot of people, and through those people, I met my wonderful wife, Elisa. And we have 3 children together, Braden, Ashton, and Macy. Braden's in 8th grade currently, Ashton's in 5th grade, and Macy's in 1st, so we're spread through a lot of the buildings in town. And just really proud of our school district that we have here, and proud of all of our administration, our teachers, our staff that have been putting all this absolutely difficult work into what we've been enduring over the past several months, the year of COVID. And I'm excited for the opportunity to serve the community on the school board and just bring my experiences from owning a business into the school board. I've had a landscaping business here in town for 17 years along with my business partner, and we've met a lot of great people in town through that as well. And so thank you to the Mahomet Chamber of Commerce for putting this on this evening, and I look forward to meeting more of you over the coming weeks, and please reach out if you have any questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Justin. Next, we have Rebecca Richardson, who is a 30-year resident of the Mahomet area. Going with, I didn't see the kids, so I don't know how many kids went through the schools, but I'm sure Rebecca will bring us up to date. But Rebecca brings with her a lifelong resume of higher education in various fields and a lot of volunteer work. Rebecca?
Thanks, Stacy. I appreciate the Chamber hosting this event, and I want to concur with Sonny that it's really nice to be able to sit at a table with a lot of qualified people that are so passionate and proud of our community, and we want to continue to try to improve upon it. I do indeed have 3 children who grew up here in this school district. I have Adam is the oldest. He graduated in '97. He is currently in the Wentzville, St. Louis area with his family. I have Drew, who is graduated in '05, and he lives in Urbana with Susie and their dog Vinny, and 2 cats. And also Caitlin, our youngest, is an opera singer, aspiring opera singer in Chicago. So they all took away tremendous skills, and they also took away a lot of great information and knowledge having gone through this school system. Most of my time in the Mahomet schools were volunteering for either music boosters, drama boosters, marching band, any myriad of lots of volunteer opportunities. And those were really fun times. I really appreciated them and learned a lot and built great relationships with people that I still have to this day. So a little bit about what I do right now. I am a consultant for the renewable energy industry. So I work with state regulators and adults doing training and learning, giving them learning opportunities for learning more about liquid fuel. And so that's what I'm doing these days. It does involve a lot of training, so I have a lot of experience working with adults and figuring out how they learn best and what things they don't learn in a very easy way. So the reason I'm running is because I have the time to commit. My kids are grown and they're all successful adults. And I feel like it's time for me to be able to pay back to the community. I have a real interest in organizational dynamics, so this is something that I have kind of wanted to do for a while, but I wanted to wait purposely until my kids were out of school. So I believe in the power of education, and I believe that all students in our district not only deserve, but we are obligated to give them the opportunity to have an excellent education. So I want to bring civility and professionalism back to the boardroom. And Max, I would agree with you. We aren't broken. We could just be better. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Next, we welcome Laura Eden Lang, who graduated from Mahomet in 1999. Oops, I don't know if I was supposed to say that. No. Laura's worked around, actually, Laura has worked around the world to improve educational opportunities for at-risk children. And now she calls Mahomet her home along with her husband and 5 children. Laura?
Yeah, thank you so much. Like he said, I grew up here in Mahomet, right off of Woodglen, off of 13 acres, so made a few mud pies in my day. Grew up here, had the privilege of growing up in Mahomet. Just phenomenal teachers. If you've been following my page, Mr. Nagy, Mrs. Barker, Mrs. Porter, just phenomenal educators that have really shaped who I am today. Yeah, so grew up here, went off to Chicago, where I ended up doing my undergraduate work and working with non-for-profits. A lot of time while I was doing my undergraduate with refugees, at-risk children, working in Roosevelt High School. I went on from there to work for a number of different religious organizations. So doing curriculum writing for churches, teaching and training adults and children. Most recently, I was in Berlin, Germany for almost 5 years, working with a non-for-profit. And 50% of that time ended up being with the Berlin government, which was such a privilege, where I got to work at an former East Germany neighborhood to bring urban renewal. And in the midst of all that and starting a non-for-profit, we went through the refugee crisis. So I got the privilege of working with refugees coming into a country, trying to understand how this new framework works, and I got to learn from their wonderful strengths. I moved back here about 4 years ago because I wanted to give my kids really that solidity that I had had as a child. I love that we have the small town, being able to run around, know our neighbors, and of course the schools. So we moved back here 4 years ago, and like you said, I've got 5, and they go 15, 14, 13, 12, and 11 at the moment. So they are sprinkled between the high school and junior high. Most recently, I'm working at the University of Illinois in administration. So for the Department of Psychology, I schedule all their courses, work with faculty and graduate students. But why do I want to run for the board? I've got a lot going on. I've got a lot of kids. And the answer is, there's nothing better to give your time to. I'm so proud of Mahomet-Seymour Schools, the foundation that they gave me as a student to really go out into the world with integrity and character and hard work. And that's why I brought my kids back. And so I'm proud of our schools. At the same time, I see the need for new growth on top of this solid foundation that we have. The shape of Mahomet is really changing. We're getting a different population along with some of the originals, and we need to learn how to work together well. So I think it's really time for board members who work together as a team, that every single 7-person on the board member has equal opportunity to talk, to be heard, to work together, and to compromise. Focus on business of the taxpayers, to address our financial challenges currently as a district, to address our capacity issues as the village continues to grow, and to provide an environment where teachers and students feel included and heard and understood. And I think also to be innovative leaders in K-12 education, which is right now why I'm finishing my master's degree in Masters of Education of Education Policy, Organization, and Leadership. Thank you so much for having us here tonight.
Thank you so much, Laura. Last but certainly not least, Patrick McKay, who, Patrick loves a good challenge. I can't think of a better place to get a good challenge than the Mahomet-Seymour School Board. Patrick brings, again, a wealth of knowledge into our forum today with computer knowledge and software and such, but I'll let him tell you about that. More importantly, he lives in Mahomet with his wife, Tatiana.
That's correct.
All right.
Oh, sorry, that's correct.
and their 2 children who both attend Middletown Prairie. Patrick?
Thank you, Stacy, and thank you to the Chamber for hosting and organizing this wonderful event. Thank you to everyone that submitted questions. Thank you to everyone who's busy typing away questions, and thank you to the other candidates. I think it takes a fair bit of bravery to put yourself out there and run for office, so kudos to all of you. So as Stacy mentioned, my name is Patrick McKay. My wife Tatiana and I, we have 3 little kids. 2 of them are at Middletown Prairie, so Gabby is 7, James is 5, and then Valeria, she is almost 11 months. So we actually track the pandemic with her. She was actually born 2 weeks after everyone went home, right? We all got those packets and struggled to, well, figure out what to do next. My wife and I, my wife is actually originally from Colombia, so we're actually raising biracial, bilingual children. And so for us, diversity isn't just a buzzword, right? Diversity is our everyday happy reality. Why am I running? So we did the math, back in the napkin math, and we said, well, we've got 20 years to go as constituents, as parents. And we said, there's no better time than now to get involved. And I think that's true because the next term, the board's going to have to decide some very important issues, not including but not limited to overcrowding and capacity. How do we get our students caught up post-COVID? Negotiating a new contract with the teachers union. and also examining diversity in our community. A little bit about myself professionally. Currently, I'm the COO at Runtime Verification, a technology services firm based in Urbana. We provide software testing and verification to clients across the globe. Prior to joining Runtime in 2018, I was the founding director of Capital One's operation in the Research Park, where we built a hybrid model employing full-time and student interns. And then before that, I was the managing director for a mobile development subsidiary for a German e-commerce services firm. I look forward to answering all of your questions, and yeah, super excited to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Patrick. So now we're going to get into the question portion. So each candidate was provided the questions that we're starting off with, so they could give some thought and provide us with their feelings and thoughts about some of the questions that we took from the local audience in Mahomet. These are all of these questions were submitted by members of the community, some with kids in the school, some without. But important to, again, get a feel for what you're looking for these candidates to say to you. So, Patrick, you mentioned that you're the parents of, did you say multiracial?
Or this working, right? Biracial, bilingual kids. So
biracial, bilingual.
Yeah.
I'm biracial, but I'm not bilingual. So, but I'd like to start off the question with you. So, as we go through each candidate, I'd love for if you guys could hold your questions to 2 minutes. I'm sorry, your answers to 2 minutes, and we'll kind of get through. But I'd like to start with Patrick. First question is, diversity is lacking on all fronts in our schools, including students, faculty, staff members of the school board, and administrators. Schools are an important reason why new residents choose one town over the other, and representation matters. How can the school board help to improve our school's diversity and better prepare our students for the world outside of Mahomet?
Yeah, great question. I think it's important to note, obviously, the changing demographics in our community, right? So we look very different than we were 5 to 10 years ago. It's also important to acknowledge that that's not going to reverse itself, right? As we see more and more young families move into those new single-family homes that are being built south of town. It's also important to note, I think, that the diversity issues and those challenges in terms of hiring teachers and administrators, that is a countrywide issue. It's not just here in Mahomet. Now, improving diversity in the workforce, I think something that we could do, and I think we could do with outside help, seeking out third-party expertise, is let's take a look at the hiring practices and processes that we have in the district, right? Perhaps there is unconscious bias in those processes and practices that are actually discouraging minorities to apply for positions. In terms of improving diversity on the board itself, well, you can't force people to run for the board, but you can definitely give them opportunities to serve in different capacities, right? And hopefully that would be a catalyst itself for actually running for the board. Now, in terms of our students, I think we're definitely responsible for readying our students outside, for a world outside of Mahomet. I would support the board facilitating a curriculum review led by teachers and educators, obviously also seeking input from credible third parties. Obviously knowing that the majority of the curriculum obviously is mandated by the state. Finally, in terms of diversity, it's important to acknowledge that it's okay that this topic makes us feel uncomfortable, but there are wonderful positives by introducing diversity in the classroom. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to go to Justin Lamb.
Thank you. Our community is made up of people that live here and people that move here. So while it's impossible to control that as a person who lives here, one thing that we can do is be very welcoming to anybody that does move into our community and welcome them with open arms, and just being a decent human being obviously is very important. To make Mahomet-Seymour a welcoming place, we need to be the best we can be as a person. Within the schools, we need to make sure that we have the resources in place so that we can best serve our student population. And the resources being literature, the textbooks being where we want them, continued training for our teachers and staff and administration and stuff like that. As far as opportunities for teachers and administrators, board members and whatnot, when opportunities do open up to be for other people to come in, we just need to put that information out there for all and anybody to see the opportunities that they could come into for Mahomet. And like I said, just welcoming everybody with open arms. Thanks.
Laura?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think our school board really has a wonderful opportunity to really celebrate diversity. You know, this isn't something we should be afraid of. I appreciate what Patrick's saying about this is a topic that often makes us feel uncomfortable. And what I've noticed is that when we lean into things that make us uncomfortable, that's when we have the most growth. When we don't have growth is when we pull back from it. Diversity is already here, and diversity is continuing to come. So I think it's really an exciting time for the school board to set the tone, to work with the superintendent, to kind of set this tone, because then it trickles down into our wonderful staff and faculty, that then trickles into our families and students. I think our students, when I've met with them and heard from students and parents in the community, they are ready for these conversations. These are conversations that can be really helpful, that can have building character and strength going on. So I think the school board can really help by leading the way and not reeling back from it, but leaning into it. The other part of the question is thinking about how can we prepare our students for the world beyond. And I know as a lot of Mahomet-Seymour graduates have found out when they leave the world, wow, it's really different. And one of those ways is offering our students the ability to have more language training. I think language training should start a whole lot younger because that's when our brains are ready to take it, but then also to engage with culture and ideas and to celebrate those throughout our schools, giving our students opportunity to engage with the world here in Mahomet.
Sonny?
Laura, I love that idea. Watching the Dual Language Academy in Champaign, like I love that idea. So when we're thinking about diversity, when you're thinking about diversity as simply race and ethnicity, you can't deny that there's not race and ethnic diversity in Mahomet. But one of the pieces that I think often gets overlooked is the fact that there are other marginalized populations in our community that do provide diversity and do provide a little bit of texture to our schools. We have diversity in family structure and family makeup. We have diversity in socioeconomic status. We have diversity in learning abilities and physical abilities, and those are all populations that we do need to make sure that we're taking care of. You know, Patrick was right. If you look at state data, statewide data in the state of Illinois, actually, there are only approximately 6% of all teachers in the state of Illinois identify as black. When you look at how many identify as white, it is over 82%. So when we look at what our teaching population looks like and how we can bring in more diverse teachers, I actually might think it kind of starts before they get to being teachers. It actually starts in pre-service education and even in high school, opening the eyes of students to what teachers can do in the future. When we're looking at our current student needs, kind of like Justin was alluding to, when we examine the Illinois Interactive Report Card, you can see that there's a significant learning gap between students who are identified as low-income learners and students who are identified as non-low-income learners. And this population really needs to be catered to and helped and supported in as many ways as we possibly can. This is not a trend, this is not a one-time gap. This is a trend that has been happening over the last several years. And we have to make sure that all of our students, whether they are racially diverse, whether they are socioeconomically diverse, whether they are physically diverse and with physical abilities, that we are meeting the needs of all of those students, and we're preparing them for life outside of Mahomet by getting them to achieve at their highest level and developing social competencies so that they can collaborate well with others. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonny. Rebecca?
Yes, and I agree, Sonny, that you know, my thought on this question about diversity, if you go to the actual definition of diversity or the meaning of diversity, it's really simply difference. And so our population of students, we already have dealt with a lot of differences. And so, but I think we could do better dealing with those differences. And the academic gap or the achievement gap that Sonny talked about is actually one of my major platforms. I want to see us narrow that gap because I think that It's been a long time trend that we have underserved that population. We do an excellent job preparing students for college and college prep, but we are really challenged when it comes to serving these low-income students and other types of racially diverse students as well. And you know, it's not only us that recognizes these differences. There are people outside of our community who recognize that we don't have the best track record when it comes to diversity. Greatschools.com is what Zillow uses when they, when you're looking at homes in various communities, and you take a look. The first thing parents will look at is the schools, and we are ranked 2 out of 10 for racial diversity. And so that really brings us down in terms of our ranking with a very influential organization like greatschools.com. So I do think we have a lot to work on. I think it takes time. I think that's part of the thing is we all want revolution and change fast, but it doesn't matter that it happens in our lifetime. It matters that it happens. And so sometimes we have to be patient and let it happen organically, but we also can really take the time to make it happen and take ownership of it as well. Thank you.
And Max.
Sure, thanks, Stacy. You know, with national events in the last year, we've heard a lot about diversity, and there's really an ongoing national discussion, and we're a part of that here in Mahomet. As far as the school goes, I think first of all it's important to make a distinction. Our school is charged with serving our local community. However, the school district isn't really in charge of who moves here or who makes up that community. That's a situation the school district inherits, not something the school district gets to decide. But we do have some decisions we can make, and there are places that we can show some leadership. And the question that mentioned faculty and staff, and we really do try and desire to show some diversification and some diversity when we hire faculty and staff. The problem is we're in the middle of this little situation called a national teacher shortage. And we've got a shortage not only nationally, but we've got even more of a shortage in Illinois. Because frankly, with the financial conditions in Illinois, most bright education folks want to go somewhere else. So we've had some unopened positions, some unfilled positions, especially in special needs for about 4 years now. In December, we voted to revise board policies 110, 310, and 610, and that represents a district commitment. We put diversity language in those. We also went to great efforts with our citizen group when we picked our citizens group to do our initiative. We wanted that to be inclusive. Finally, we're fully aware that we're students that are oftentimes are entering situations when they graduate from Mahomet that are more diverse than our district. And we try to do our best to compare students with social emotional learning and cultural competency. It is a work in process here in Mahomet.
Thank you, Max. So I'd like to stay on this for just one more second. And if you guys could limit your answers, I would like to give each of you a chance to kind of respond. Max, and somebody else brought up the point of we really can't decide who moves into our community, but if you can, in a minute or less, so we don't take up too much time, how as a school board member would you kind of propose, or what thoughts or ideas do you have that would improve the diversity around, I mean, the full gamut of the schools? We're not just talking students, but faculty, staff, and so forth. If you have any thoughts on that. And Patrick, we'll start down there and then just come down the line. And like I said, if you guys could keep that as short as possible, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. So I already mentioned that possibly we could look at the hiring practices to see if we can actually see if there's any unconscious bias which actually works against our favor in terms of hiring and attracting diverse candidates. Also, I think there's an opportunity, and I think we're going to get to this question in terms of, is there something we can do at the committee level to actually involve the community in these conversations? We know that based on conversations with voters that this is an important issue. It's a hot button issue. They want to see that done. I think the conversations we've had are indicative of its importance in the community. And so I think that's definitely something we can also pursue.
Thank you. Laura?
Yeah, I'd agree with Patrick. It's thinking a lot about our hiring practices. I think we have a few folks that are ethnically diverse already on our faculty and staff, but it's quite a small pool at this point. And I would love to make our community more of a welcoming environment for people of different demographics, whether, I mean, like Sonny was saying earlier, we all come in different shapes and sizes, different strengths and weaknesses, different vocations, different learning disabilities or learning strengths, different colors, different cultural backgrounds. And unfortunately, I don't think Mahomet's always had a record of being super welcoming in that area, but I see that happening now. I see people, wonderful people who've lived here for years, people that I know really being welcoming to people in the community. And I think that's where it starts, is this atmosphere of really welcoming people. And then the students feel that from us. So I think also providing for our faculty and staff continued training, opportunities to explore what's out there. I think it's really easy to become, you know, a little complacent in your job because life is busy and you've got kids at home. But I think if we can offer them as a district a chance to interact with different cultures, different innovations in learning, and different languages, I think it will help. I think it'll encourage people and we'll see a lot of growth.
Yeah, obviously I agree with quite a few things that have been said. I agree with everything, actually, that's already been said. Just a kind of a point to a finer point to what has been said. We don't control who comes here ultimately. In fact, over the past 5 years, we have our biracial student population has grown 5%. So we are. It's happening, and we can either plan for it and welcome it and serve the needs of that population, or we can choose to be fearful of it and be intimidated by it. I just really think that we are missing an opportunity there, because if people see that we are providing a service and we are welcoming to those ethnically diverse populations, more will come. And I'm not saying just because they're ethnically diverse they should come, but I'm saying, you know, when you have high-achieving students, when you have people who want to come and live in your community and make it better, because we know diversity makes us smarter, and that's data has proven that. I think it's really important that we keep our eye on that and we look at it from that way. So the 341 students that make up our 13% of our population are not white. So we have to serve those needs of those 13% as well.
Thank you.
Yes, and I agree with Laura and Rebecca. I mean, if we can embrace like where we've gotten to this point and just continue to build off that, being welcoming and being supportive and encouraging growth in those areas, I think we have, I mean, it's not something that can change overnight. It's something that's got to build. It's got to keep continuing in the right direction. And like Laura said, I'm encouraged with what I've been seeing in the recent past, just where we're moving with this, and it's very encouraging to me. Thank you.
I was going to touch on this in the next question, but you're throwing me off, Stacy. So I'm going to try to take bits and pieces here. But I think one of the pieces that everybody has hit on is that we need to be a welcoming community, and that we as adults need to be modeling that common respect and those working relationships for our children and for our community members. You know, I keep hearing that it'd be great to involve the teachers in this planning and all of that, and I think it's important to note that they are. There is activity taking place with diversity, inclusion, and equity within the district that's already happening behind the scenes, and it's been happening for several years. And so I am truly a believer that when you are looking for lasting, meaningful change, that takes a long time, just like Rebecca said. If you want instant change, you can mandate something, you'll be met with resistance, and maybe you'll see quote-unquote change, which is really just compliance. But if you're looking for meaningful change that will last over time and actually make our schools and our community and our families even better, that has to kind of come a little more organically, a little more within from the experts, our teachers, who are kind of leading this task.
I think there's been a lot of good comments made so far. I particularly like what Sonny said there at the end. I also will steal a little bit from what I think is the next question. But one thing that we can do as a school district is we need to make sure our staff and the folks that work for us feel comfortable and have the skills in order to address issues of diversity and inclusion when they come up. And the more that they are comfortable with that, the more experience they have, the more tools they feel they have, the better they feel they are at it, the more natural that process will become. And the more we'll work with our kids, and the more we'll work with our families, and the more we'll move it forward in Mahomet. It, like Sonny said, is meaningful change is not instantaneous. It takes time. It has to be done on purpose, and we can do it. We've solved all kinds of problems here in our schools and our community, and if we put our heads together and really work at this, I'm convinced we've got people that can do it.
Thank you, and thank you for that slight departure. I just thought, since that was a great point bringing up, and I didn't mean to cut into the next question, but yeah, just to dig a little bit deeper because of what we experienced over the last year, and as a minority moving into Mahomet 19 years ago, I've never felt anything but welcomed. But that doesn't mean that instances don't arise, like in our next question. Since moving to Mahomet 3 years ago, both my son, a middle schooler, and daughter in elementary have experienced multiple issues with race and equality in our schools. Despite countless letters and conversations with the school board and several protests this summer, the current board has twice voted down a district-level committee to address issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Would you support a district committee to unify our efforts, guide future steps, and send a message to our community that all students matter and the issue deserves our attention and long-term commitment? I'd like to start with Rebecca.
Well, first of all, make it short and sweet to begin with. Yes, absolutely. I would support that 100%. I watched with kind of confusion and uncertainty about why the board they were hesitant to do that, except for the fact that, there were questions like, well, we don't know what the goal is. We don't know what the scope is. We don't know what the planning is. That isn't how you begin a conversation. You begin a conversation by starting. And so I think that, I think the board missed out on an opportunity there, but I don't think it's too late. I think that, we still can do better. And like we were saying earlier, maybe last year it was too scary. We dealt with COVID. We dealt with, a lot of things. We dealt with a lot of racial adversity and a lot of brutality last year. I think maybe giving it some time and stepping back, maybe it is a good time to revisit that and be able to put it in a context that is positive and moving forward rather than reactive and defensive. So I would absolutely be in support of forming that type of committee now. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to go to Max.
Sure. Thanks, Stacy. 9 years ago, a couple teachers at our high school worked to implement an ACT, now SAT, prep period for juniors. The goals were to review and refresh juniors on material that would be on the test, along with practicing test-taking skills, and to build confidence along with competency. In 3 years, we were able to move high school ACT scores from an average of 21.6 to 24.4. Our school district, which had always been regarded as academically strong, was suddenly consistently being ranked the #1 and #2 academic high school in downstate Illinois. Most importantly, parents shared with me that their younger children who participated in this new program, who in their parents' opinion weren't really any smarter than their older siblings who didn't have the program, had really benefited because of greater options. Both a larger number of interested colleges and more substantial scholarship dollars became available to the younger kids. We saw a 19% increase in students going on to college programs. The challenge for the Board of Education had been to pursue excellence. There was no board-initiated directive, but there was a commitment and vision of a small group of teachers, particularly Dan Ryan and Jamie Colbert, that were responsible for this huge change. Many of you know that Dr. Lindsay Hall was a part of our school district earlier in her career as a junior high principal. 4 years ago, she came back as superintendent, and Dr. Hall noticed immediately that our community had changed over the years and realized that change would continue. She worked with our director of instruction, Dr. Nicole Rummel, who reached out to the University of Illinois and began a relationship with the U of I consultants to help our schools address issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. They began with staff development and training, teaching district employees skills, helping them to gain comfort in addressing these areas. Again, this began 4 years ago. It started 4 years ago, well before the national events of last summer. Currently, we have equity, diversity, and inclusion committees in each building, looking at ways they can improve our schools and better equip our students. The work is ongoing. Our high school now has an active Gay Straight Alliance student group. This would have been unheard of not too many years ago when my son was a student here. This year, our high school diversity committee also launched Bulldog Voices, a place where students can gather and discuss equity and inclusion issues. I understand our students are having some great discussions as they look to address issues and make our community better. If leadership edicts, resolutions, and leadership level committees could really solve these issues, these problems would have been solved nationally years ago, and last summer never would have happened. It takes real work in the trenches. It takes real work to impact lives in our community, and I'm proud and thankful that our district is doing real work in these important areas.
Laura?
Well, first of all, I want to address the writer of the question and say I am sorry for what you've encountered. And I confess I am optimistically oblivious a lot of times about these things because of the family I was born into and where I'm at in status right now. So I am sorry that you've had to walk through that and your kids have to walk through that. This has been such a wonderful process of going through this election. It's just meeting with people, and people have been pouring out their stories, especially students. And I have heard a lot of these cases, which has just surprised me. The wonderful thing is there are other cases of wonderful, encouraging things going on. So we need to work on those two together. But I want to address what Max said. He's absolutely right. There's already a district committee headed up by Dr. Rummel and Dr. Hall. They've done a good job to go ahead and start engagement to some degree, and each building does have its own committee. But I would propose instead of a district committee that we have a board committee, because a board committee can really set a tone and oversight to bring cohesiveness between the different buildings. As I've engaged with people within these committees, they're floundering a little bit to understand cohesively what their direction is. And I think to really make a direction, we need to add some sort of guidance and idea and really cast a vision. What are our goals? What do those look like? And how do we reach those? So I'm excited to see what the years ahead of us bring, because like Max said, I think we've cracked open the case and begun. But there's a lot of just vision casting and goal setting we can do.
Thank you. Sonny?
So a lot of what has been said is what I want to echo. When asked if I would support a district committee regarding these diversity, inclusion, and equity issues, it's a very wishy-washy answer. I would support it if it complemented the work that is already being done. As Max mentioned, this is work that has been ongoing behind the scenes for quite a while, and it has become a very internalized and personal process for the teachers who are leading it. So I would be hesitant to bring in anybody from maybe who isn't a classroom teacher, who isn't an educator, to come in and dictate or propose what teachers might be doing wrong or what teachers might need to change. Personally, speaking only as myself, if I had somebody who wasn't a teacher come in and tell me what I needed to do differently in my classroom, I would be highly offended. So I have a feeling that if we were to propose a different committee, the easiest way to make that actually feasible is to make sure that it's connecting and complementing with the work that we're already doing, and it's not undermining what teachers and administrators and staff and leaders have already put into place. So I actually think the biggest issue here is the communication that's coming from the building level and the district level surrounding what we are already doing with diversity, equity, and inclusion. If our community and our families had a better understanding of what it is that our teachers are taking on, then I feel like people would be a little more understanding of what was happening and would be a lot more invested in making it even better for our schools.
Patrick?
Thank you. Like Rebecca, I'll be short and sweet in terms of answering the question. First and foremost, yes, I would support the creation of a committee. I do agree with the other folks that already have spoken that there needs to be continuity and connection with the ongoing efforts and initiatives that are already in place. However, when you read this question and when you watched or listened to those folks that poured out their souls last year and talked about their experiences, you have to ask yourself, what more can we do? Not, in asking that question is not an admission of failure or guilt or blame, but your response needs to constantly evolve. It's not static. This is a very dynamic issue, and once again, it's an uncomfortable one. And also, I think, this particular topic of diversity, it's come up time and again in individual conversations I've had with folks in the community. It's come up with folks in group settings. And I think that's indicative of its importance. And I think it shows an appetite in this community in that people are engaged. And I think these people do know what's going on in the schools. They are informed. But I think we should have this further initiative. Why not raise this issue that we all agree is of the utmost importance to the same level as another issue that we're going to talk about, which is capacity in our schools. They're equally important, and they come up in equal time in the conversations that we've had. Thank you.
Justin?
All right, thank you. I'd also like to say I'm sorry that this has happened to your family, and it bothers me greatly as a parent. I wish we could live in a world where everybody could just get along. I mean, obviously that's impossible. These are critical issues that all of our students are facing today, and every one of our students should be valued and challenged to achieve their highest potential. In my eyes, diversity, equity, and inclusion should bring us closer together, not separate us. As a parent, we have a responsibility at home as well. It's not just in our schools. We have to start at home. We have to start teaching our kids values at an early age. I mean, kids aren't born this way. I mean, it's learned somewhere along the line, and we need to address all fronts and make sure that we can address it and properly just prepare our kids for their life ahead. Like we've said, the current groundwork that we have in place is good, and I think we're working towards great things with that. And to answer the question, I would say that I'm at a maybe. Yes, I would definitely be interested in hearing how we could collaborate and work a committee into this and figure out how we can best address this situation. Thank you.
Thank you. So now let's move on to our next topic, which, Patrick, you stole a little bit of my thunder, but that's okay. That's what, because we're here to see you guys. So Patrick brought up a good point, and our next question brings the second point about overcrowding in schools, or the perception of overcrowding in schools. How do you plan to address the overcrowding in schools, not necessarily class size, with the continued growth of the community? Will you be in favor of continuing the plan to build a new junior high school next to Middletown Prairie School, or propose something different? Let's start with Sonny Mcmurray.
I know this sounds crazy, but I'm actually really glad this is a problem we have, because it means people are moving to Mahomet, and our community is a place where people want to be, and our schools are a place where people want to be. That being said, I remember when the new junior high was being proposed, and I remember thinking, oh yes, my youngest is going to be able to go to that junior high. And now she's in third grade, and I'm pretty sure she's not going to be going to the junior high. So going back to the idea of now having this urgent need because we are outgrowing our facilities, I am not against having the junior high campus where it was initially planned to be, which was right next to Middletown Prairie. We have that land. But I think what we need to do before we make any decisions as a board is to really turn back to this new facilities planning committee that's just taken off, what is it called? Bulldog Blueprint? Bulldog bulldog blueprint. I think we need to turn back to those community members who are working to figure out what our facility needs are, what we currently have, what land we currently own, whether it would be possible to use that land for a school or for any other resources. And then I also think that we need to consider the other facilities within the district. So yes, right now, junior high is incredibly overcrowded. However, we need to think about Lincoln Trail. We need to think about updating the high school for a new generation of learners. We might even need to think about the transportation department. If we have schools on two sides of the town, then perhaps we need to have conversations about moving that. Short term, there are lots of options that our district can consider. Obviously, portable classrooms behind the school building is an option, but our district has been really creative before. You know, when we moved from half-day kindergarten to full-day kindergarten, we didn't think we had any space. And then the next thing you know, the conference room at Middletown has been turned into 5 classrooms. So our district has a lot of creativity within their thinking that short-term we can make some changes, but long-term we definitely need to be thinking about our facilities.
Laura.
Yeah, like Sonny said, this is not a new problem. I remember when I moved here in '85 as a 4-year-old, that it was already starting to burst at the seams. We're getting excited, and they built the brand new Sangamon building. And year after year, the school board has really worked to increase that. But this isn't a surprise. You know, 10 years ago, we heard, wow, our schools are at capacity. Actually, the junior high is at capacity is what they said 10 years ago. And our other schools were getting there very, very quickly. So for the last 10 years, we've known this problem, and it shouldn't be at the crisis point, really, that it is right now. So we need to jump in there. I love this community engagement initiative. We need to really help them, and they need to identify their priorities, and then really wait to hear from the community. Like Sonny was saying, I don't know if the right answer is to have the junior high out there by MPE. It might be, but like she said, the school district actually owns quite a bit of land, so it's stepping back and thinking about what are the resources we really have on hand that we can use to not increase taxpayer dollars, that we can really use them as good stewards, because we are actually just stewards of district money. It's not our money to spend, but district. And also to really think creatively, like Sonny was mentioning. So I work in scheduling, and a lot of times schools that suffer from overcrowding can go ahead and use scheduling or creative use of facilities. So I'm really excited to see what comes up, and I think to wait for this community engagement group to really set their priorities and bring us some great feedback, and then to move.
Thank you. Justin.
Okay, yes, this is definitely a hot topic as we are busting at our seams here in Mahomet, and everything appears that we're going to keep growing and keep moving in that direction. So to answer the question, yes, I would support building the junior high out by MPE, because that's land that we currently own. It's a plan that's kind of been in the works over the years, and I'm definitely open to hearing other options, exploring those options. If there's other properties that are available, other pieces of ground that we are able to build what we need on, and it's feasible, we can definitely look into those too. And in the short term, like others have mentioned, we need to be creative with the space that we have, and whether that means throwing up dividers in current rooms to make 2 separate rooms or something like that, bringing in portable buildings for temporary use, stuff along those lines. But definitely we need to make this one of our top priorities as we continue to grow.
Rebecca.
Yes, clearly overcrowding has been an issue for a long time. It's a little bit amazing, I think, and there's no blame to be cast here, but it just takes a really, really long time to figure out how to build up your capacity. And we've really struggled with that over the last 15, 20 years even. I think things have changed quite a bit in the district since the original concept of building the junior high on that land adjacent to MPE. I would also say that, we have still 840 new dwellings slated to be built that haven't been built yet. About half of the families that moved to, or about half of the population that moves to Mahomet have families. So we're going to say that about 400 family units are going to have kids. So we do need to think about a long-term plan to address the needs of not just the junior high, although the junior high is woefully in need of attention. But I think we need to be careful about a thing called functional fixedness, and that is having an end game and then working a plan backwards and starting to make sure you get the end thing that you want. And I think we have to be really careful about that because, like everyone else has said, creativity is really important at this point. And so, you know, and as far as the short term goes, there are, you know, we need to first of all be really mindful of the decisions that we make and how it will impact things in the longer term. For example, I still don't have an understanding of why we sold Sangamon. There could be a very good reason why we did, but I can't find the answer to that. So I think that's one thing that we need to not repeat, is to not sell something that's an asset to our public education and we can't utilize it anymore. I also think in the short term, we really do have to be creative. You know, we're really fortunate in a way. COVID wasn't all bad. We learned that some of our students can learn virtually just as well as they can in the classroom. So creative thinking about how we educate our students. Some of them may do better virtually, or they may do just as well virtually. So we may be able to use classrooms for some students and virtual learning for others. You know, staggered starts. Lessons that we've learned from COVID, I think we can apply in the short and even maybe in the longer term. Thank you.
McComb.
So this isn't a new issue. We've been playing catch up with facilities in Mahomet-Seymour for years, decades, okay? And the problem is the people come and the money trails, and that has really been the issue. We've been working now for 3 years to get a community engagement initiative up and running, and that is a community effort to really assess our space issues and figure out where we need to go and what we need to do. It was delayed by the last election. It was delayed by the pandemic. We had board members this time that said, well, we're about to have an election. We better delay it. And on my assistance and the assistance of the majority of the board, we kept it moving forward. That group has met a couple times now. It's a 20-member group. 20-plus members of our community. We've tried to make it as diverse as we can. They're going to oversee that effort. They've got 4 co-chairs already lined out. They've picked the name Bulldog Blueprint, and pretty soon you're going to see community-wide meetings, whether they're virtual or whether they're in person, we don't know yet, but where people will get to come and share input and thoughts and have a stake in what we do with facilities. No surprise, the junior high is the most pressing need we have. We expect that to be addressed at the front end. And the reason we're bringing the community in is we need community support. We have done all we can with the money that's available. There will be a little bit of debt load coming free in a few years, but not near enough to solve what we need to do. So that's why the community needs to be on board. The community needs to understand the cost. The community needs to understand the needs. And do we need to build a junior high and where we need to build it? I'm going to tell you right now, I trust our community and I trust the process. There's a little angst on that, I think, with some board members that want to see more board input into this. But we need community support to do this, and the community has to help us figure this out. And I'm confident we will. Whether it's build a junior high, whether it's build another building and move the junior high into an existing building, they'll work through that, and I will support what the community comes up with.
Patrick?
Well, you know, going last year, I think I'd like to say something real quick. In this election where people say that, you know, we can't get along, man, there's a lot of room for agreement here about this topic. Yes, I would support the construction of a new junior high, but I think, as everyone has just said, that is a long-term play here, right? So, and that's, as Max just said, that's going to require significant input from the community above and beyond what's already been done or facilitated through the Bulldog Blueprint Committee. Can't even speak right now. And then Sonny already kind of touched on some of the issues that will need to be addressed with respect to that new junior high, right? So what about continuity that exists today between the junior high and the high school? What consideration should we address with faculty and staff which might have responsibilities at both buildings? What sort of transportation issues do we need to be mindful of as we essentially separate into two different campuses? And finally, I would love to make sure, and I'm sure we're going to see this, is we definitely need to engage with teachers with respect to any construction of a new junior high, because they do have such a unique perspective and experiences to share with the community. Now, that's the long-term play, but what can we do in the short term to alleviate the issue? Folks have already mentioned some of those options that we should consider that should get serious consideration and merit by that committee. That includes modular classrooms, could include creative reuse of space, and also, who knows, maybe we could even consider an addition to the existing space. All I'm saying is here, all this needs to be put on the table. It needs to be put in front of the community, and we need to have their serious input and support.
Thank you. So, moving on to a topic that I think is of concern or curiosity to a lot of the population in Mahomet, especially those that kind of watch the school board meetings. I'd like to start off with Justin on this question, which is, I think most would agree that a major issue with our current school board is the obvious split in opposing sides, making it nearly impossible to have productive conversations and collaborative discussions. With recent comments, it's become apparent that some candidates have already aligned with a side. How do you, as a new school board member or current school board member, how would you propose to break down the walls of these opposing sides so that the board can truly focus on what's best for the district and our kids? And how can we improve the overall conduct of, or the overall perception of conduct of our board?
Yes, that's a great question. Definitely an issue that we need to get figured out. And as a new member to the board, if I am elected, I would have the opportunity. Pass it the other mic, and I will check that. All right. That better? All right. So yes, this is definitely a topic that we need to get figured out. I was saying, as a new board member, I would have the opportunity to have a fresh start and to build new relationships with all the other board members. It's obviously very important to be able to have good relationships to make the decisions that's best for our students and community. We have to have teamwork, we have to have collaboration to be able to get these decisions made. We got to find some common ground somewhere, and obviously I think one of the biggest issue we have, or biggest focus we need to have, is on our students. So if we can come to agreement on putting our students first, building from there, trying to build some relationships and breaking these walls down. And when decisions are made on our topics and policies and stuff that we're doing, we have to keep in mind the opposing views in our decision making. We have to look at it from all sides. We have to really dig into it, figure out, talking to the community, figuring out what's best for our kids. So that's how I would propose doing that. Thanks.
Rebecca?
Thanks. Yes, this is actually one of the reasons why I decided to run for the school board, because as I saw the meetings progress throughout this year, it really did bother me and concerned me, and I really felt like I see what's going on in the work I do. I've worked with a lot of boards. We've dealt with, with the boards I've dealt with, we've had sides, we've had many issues very similar to the hard times that we're having with our current school board. And it boils down to a few things, I think. And one of them is making sure that every person who earned that seat in that boardroom is respected the same. So every single person, with the exception of Jeremy originally, but he was elected after being appointed, every single person now, starting this time around, will have been elected by their peers. So I think that it's important that everyone recognizes that we all have an equal voice on the board. I also think this is really, really an important thing that I've seen over the years with boards. You have to make sure that you elect strong leadership that's willing to put in the time and to internalize the issues and make sure they fully understand what it is they're trying to communicate and discuss. So I think some of the board meetings I've seen have been, it seemed to me like, there was a little, I think the board members could have been more prepared and backgrounded. And I guess, lastly, I would say that to make it a priority for the board members to talk to each other. I think it's really important that people develop relationships outside of their board responsibilities, because it's much harder to disrespect or to be angry with a person that you understand than it is to be disrespectful and be angry with a person that you do not. So those are the things that I would strive to do.
Thank you. Sonny?
Rebecca, we could have written each other's comments. That's almost word. It's almost word for word what I wrote down. I think what's interesting is I love data. I have friends who love data, and I want to share a little bit of data. So obviously, anybody who's been to a board meeting, seen a board meeting, you know that there are heated discussions, you know there are high emotions, but data is just kind of cut and dry. So I'm going to read this just because I don't want to get it wrong. For the voting data with the board from April of 2019 to February 21st of 2021, there were 163 voting items, including the consent agenda, because there have been some dissents on the consent agenda, but not counting in the actual meeting agenda. So I didn't, that 7-0 vote to pull in the actual meeting agenda, that was left out. What's interesting to note is that when we're thinking about this split that seems to be apparent on the board, only 19% of the votes were actually split by quote-unquote sides. Only 19% of the votes were coming out at a 4-3 split, which means that 81% of the votes that were taken, somebody compromised if there really are indeed these quote-unquote sides on the board. And what that shows me is that there may be emotions running high and there may be heavy-duty conversations happening, but decisions are being made for our school district without one side fighting against another. Now, with all that being said, clearly the board needs to work on some standards of practice, commonalities, understanding board roles and responsibilities, and Rebecca nailed it. I think we need to be starting with these relationships where what did you want to be when you grew up? What do you want to do over the summer? I mean, these conversations that need to be personalized so that you can have these relationships, because you are going to be a lot less hostile with somebody if you actually see them as another person and not just somebody who might be against you.
Laura.
Yeah, well, thank you. At the risk of sounding redundant, I guess I'm going to say, you guys, thank you. I think it's wonderful to actually see such agreement. The election is where we can see this really begin and really resist this talk of making sides and ostracizing each other, but instead coming together. We talk about diversity and we talk about building community, and this is where it begins. And these face-to-face conversations together as we meet in the community, as we meet with board meetings, as we meet on committees, as we meet in yo-yos or whisk, wherever. There really should not be sides at all. As is implied with the name of a board, we come together on a same level playing field. 7 people to work together. And so I think it starts with each individual as they come on the board saying, I'm ready to listen. I'm ready to give the best of what I have, but also not be easily offended. There's this wonderful phrase from my childhood that my parents always taught me, to consider others as better than yourself. And I think that's where it needs to begin on the board, that I consider the other board members as better than myself, to listen to them, but also give what I have the best of me with. I think also a lot of this can be alleviated with the committees and boards I've served on, is, having strong leadership and coming together to make unified priorities. So I'm excited to see what this next step in the board has. As Sonny said, there has been a lot of agreement on the current board. There's been some flaming balls of fire, but I think sometimes those are good. I think when you have have a board that always votes together, I think it kind of indicates another problem, that nobody is really talking about the difficult issues. So I applaud them for talking about difficult issues, and now it's time to talk about difficult issues and to work well together.
Max McComb.
Thanks, Stacy. You know, 2 or 3 years ago, there was a group in the community that talked about the board and said there was just too much agreement on the board. There's too many 7-0 votes, too many 6-1 votes. We need more diversity of opinion. We need more discussion. We need more options. We need to hash things out, okay? Now, interestingly enough, mostly that same group is telling us the board's too divided, too many 4-3 votes, too much disagreement. But it is true that almost everybody's concerned about board conduct. So a few thoughts, I guess, on that from my perspective. First, in my 12 years on the board, there were many times we've experienced differences of opinion. They're my first 12 years. It's only been the last 2 years that those differences of opinions became what only can be described as toxic and occasionally embarrassing to our community. I think it's important to remember each of us are responsible for our own behavior. I'm responsible for mine. I can and should encourage others to model good behavior, but I really can't control others. I am committed to engaging in the discussion in a manner that is respectful, and I want to work with those well and reflect well on our community. As president, the superintendent and I have attempted to bring the current board together. We've had consultants in twice, and again, here we can only encourage others. We can't control others. I also want to address something. There's a narrative I hear from time to time with people that the superintendent and the board president agree way too much. Well, first of all, I want you to know that's not always true. We do, however, tend to work things out behind the scenes and not bring items to the table until we are in agreement, or at least mostly agreement. Can you imagine if the board president and the board superintendent were at odds all at the same time with everything else we've got going on with the board? That would be a disaster. Finally, I hear occasionally from members in our community, and there's a narrative going around, that I am the problem. First of all, I want you to know I don't believe that to be true. I've been on the board 14 years, president for 6, and the problems really have only been around the last 2 years since the change in the makeup of the board. However, I will share this with you all. I don't have to be board president. You can elect me back to the board. I don't need to be president. It's not an automatic thing. It's not like a Supreme Court justice where I've got a life appointment. Board members choose the president each and every year. I could be selected by the board as president for another year or 2 or more, but board members will make that decision. In the end, if the board believes it's better for someone else to lead and that that's better for our district, then that's the board's decision, and I'll support that. We have the potential for new leadership coming on our board, and look forward over my next term on the board to do my part to help develop new leadership.
Thank you, Max. And of course, Patrick.
Yeah, I think that I think it's safe to say that a lot of folks across the community believe that it's been a challenging couple of years on the board. Folks have said that there's an absence of trust, respect, common decency. You know, all of that can be overcome, right? The world's not at an end. We should be able to engage in good debate, discussion, and dissent. We should be able to disagree without being disagreeable. Folks have already said it, you know, there's going to be at least 3 new board members. They've never served. I think that's an opening. That's an opening for honest exchange of ideas. I think it's an opportunity to identify the common good. It's an opportunity to compromise. Wow, look at that word. It's not a bad word, compromise, right? It gets things done. And ultimately, that's what the voters expect, right? The voters expect the board to come together and get things done. And that's going to be more important than ever as the board is going to tackle some very serious, important issues that we've already identified. I'll end with this, and it's kind of similar to what Sonny and Rebecca said. So I grew up outside of D.C., right? And D.C. used to look like a very different place when it came to politics, all right? When you were elected you moved with your entire family to the district, right? Your families engaged with the other families, regardless of what your political affiliation was, right? You broke bread. You laughed. You cried. You shared those experiences. There's no reason why we shouldn't do that here. We have no excuses. We live here together. And I would suggest, and I would hope, once that we return to normal, post-COVID, or COVID will be here, but whatever that new normal is going to be, we should be able to get together and break bread and laugh and actually learn about each other outside of the board. Then we can come together. Then we can find common good. Then we can compromise. Then we can fulfill our responsibilities to the voters.
Thank you. So now we get to move on to our last pre-planned or pre-submitted question, which again covers another topic that is of significant importance not only in our community but around the country. An estimated 15% of American population is dyslexic. Students with dyslexia often struggle to read, write, and spell. How do school board candidates propose working with the district to ensure these students are being identified promptly and supported through evidence-based reading support? Max?
Sure. First of all, everyone needs to know the board really doesn't make decisions about individual student interventions or support provided to individual students. We have professionally trained staff that does that, professional educators, and we really look to them and we look to their expertise. We have excellent people in our special education department, and as evidenced by the fact that people move here because of our special education services. Christine Northrup and her group does a great job. It's also important to note that that's the group that's probably the most short-staffed. Special ed positions are very difficult right now to find people to fill those openings. Of all the areas where we have hiring shortage, special education is the biggest problem, and it's not only here, it's really all the schools in the area, which is part of the problem. We're competing against all the other schools in the area for a very few number of folks to fill a large number of positions. Let's face it, each of us wants what's best for our kids, and that's true to the families that have special needs kids. Things become more complicated as often parents want services for their children, and there's a qualification process. And while it's a shame, sometimes the student doesn't qualify for the services. And that's not the fault of our staff. That's the way the standards are set up. And there's often strict guidance when it comes to qualifications for some of those programs that provide support. In the end, I think we need to remember we are a school district with high expectations and high standards, and that certainly extends to our students who require support services. And we need to do our best, I think, just to continue to try to serve those kids with the highest of standards and the best services we can provide.
Thank you. Patrick?
Thank you, Stacy. So I think that I would encourage everyone that has an interest in this issue, check out understood.org. It's an absolutely wonderful site, has some absolutely wonderful information. So this is a very important issue. It's another one of those issues that has come up in conversations both with individuals and groups that folks have told their own personal stories to us. I think obviously the district is committed to early identification, early intervention, and early action. I have more questions than answers about this topic, right? So are we going beyond what is expected or required with child first, right? Are we identifying folks as early as possible? Are we intervening as early as possible so we can head off those consequences that happen when kids are older and we haven't intervened early enough? Now, in terms of dyslexia itself, because that's what the question was asking about, I think it's very important to acknowledge one thing first, right? Dyslexia impacts learning, but it's not a problem with intelligence. So let's just avoid that stigma right off the bat. There's several options and approaches that are available. You can look at structured literacy. So structured literacy is an approach that has shown great benefit to dyslexic students. It relies on explicit instruction. Two other approaches and programs that we use in the district, you have the 95% group, which actually addresses phonics intervention. You also have the Wilson reading system. I'm looking at this because I want to make sure I get this correct. The Wilson approach uses the Orton-Gillingham approach, which actually is proven to be very effective with adolescents. So those are our older students. As a board member, I look forward to sitting down with our specialists, our teachers, our educators, to learn more about the approaches that we're using in the district, and also to identify where are areas that we can improve.
Thank you. Sonny?
So this is probably my favorite question because it's a total teacher question, but I won't answer it as a teacher. I instead want to answer it as a hopeful board member. Max is right. It's not up to our board members to determine how an individual child is served, and it's not up to our board members to tell a teacher how they need to determine eligibility. That's actually already established. So our teachers in our district are using data, as we all should be, to drive their decision making. We have highly capable special education teachers, interventionists, and specialists who are going to be working with those children to determine what it is that that child needs and what kind of intervention would help that child. So it used to be that qualifying for special education services meant that you had to meet a discrepancy model. So it meant that you had to have a certain level of, what is the word I'm looking for? Intelligence, I suppose. And then compared to your achievement. And if there was a discrepancy in that, you would qualify for services. But now, with the way we've moved to the multi-tiered systems of support, response to intervention is actually there to catch those kids earlier, make sure kids don't fall through the cracks. So using data on what's happening in the classrooms with students, how they're performing on standardized tests, and combining that data to figure out what you can do to intervene earlier is actually, you want to have the goal of getting these kids to independence. So that's exactly what I would be doing as a board member. I would be looking at the data of our students who are being served either through intervention or special education or any other services, and I would ask our educators, I would ask our special education team, how is this working? Is the data showing that this is making an impact on our kids? And if it's not making an impact on our kids, what resources can we help you have? How can we support you in making sure that our kids have all of their needs met?
Thank you. Laura?
I want to say thank you to Matt and Stacy for providing us with that score. We got a good Illinois score going on. Thank you, Sonny, for saying that, because I'm actually with you. This is my favorite question, just because I had the privilege of working in a special education room for about a year. And I want to stick with what they've said as well, too. I'm so thankful that I don't have to determine all of this. This is why we have our professionals, right? Christine Northrup and the rest of our special education professionals. But like they said, we are severely understaffed. So I hope that as a district, we'll be able to come up with some great resources to really support these fine special education educators, as well as getting enough paraprofessionals in the room so that our professionals, our special educators, can really have their hands free with the support that they need with paraprofessionals. The other thing as a board member is when these concerns arise as parents bring them in, we get the privilege of working with our professionals to say, hey, we have a flag up. What's going on here? How can we assist? How can we get families and educators the resources? And in the case of dyslexia specifically here, it's very, very important. The first thing is not a lot of places actually identify dyslexia as a disorder yet, which I think is a little behind the times, as in 1 in 5 students have dyslexia. And what is so critical about dyslexia is that it is addressed very quickly. You can tell by the time a child is 2.5 to 3 based on their rhyming skills and they're struggling with pronunciation where they're heading. But I'm getting into details. The issue is that if it's not identified early, there's a huge significant difference between if it's dealt with before, I think it's 3rd or 4th grade, or after. The progress is not as good. So I really hope that we can work as a district to give our special educators the support they need and the parents the listening ear they need to find out where the issues are and how we can support them.
Justin?
Yes, I'll start off by saying that Mahomet-Seymour has a reputation for having an excellent special education program, and a lot of families have moved here because of that, to get their students enrolled in that program. As a board member, I mean, we have to put our trust in our administration and in our special education staff and teachers. We have to when we get the good ones, we got to keep them here. And when we're hiring new ones, we got to go out and we got to get the best possible we can. We got to have conversations with the community. We got to have conversations with parents to find out where the concerns are and just address those as needed. Thank you.
Rebecca.
So I'm going to digress just a little bit and try and weave it back into the main thrust of this question. But you know, earlier we talked about overcrowding and how we should talk about it as not class size, but overcrowding in general. Well, I would bring classroom capacity and class size into this answer because our teachers have far, far too many students, and they have for a long time in this district. And I think that part of the early intervention and the meeting students where they are process is to provide more access, either whether it's teachers or whether it's support staff, to students, so we have an idea where we need to meet them. We need to have research-based curriculum, much like some of the other folks were talking about. It's really important to have the best curriculum for the issues that you're working with. And again, it's not a matter of, you know, too much money, because our obligation is to our students. And so if we have special needs students and we can't find teachers for them, we have to find them. That's our obligation, is to find those teachers. So if it means raising the salary, it means whatever it means, going out and recruiting them, we have to do better. We should not have those struggles with finding teachers in a tremendously highly sought after district like Mahomet is. And then finally, I guess the point I want to make is being more proactive with families. Communicating, reaching out to families rather than waiting for them to come to you with a problem is really important. And I think that was one of the things when I was out speaking with people, that's something that kind of hit me pretty hard, was that, you know, these families are struggling already with kids who really have special issues, and they spend more time with them and they spend more money and more resources. So if we can be more proactive to reach out to students, which means more resources, more staff, fewer kids per teacher, I think we can do a better job. And then I guess lastly, my point is, again, our obligation is to meet all of our students, not just the easiest ones. And so I really think that we need to do a better job of you know, meeting the needs of all of our students. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've had, again, the initial part was the pre-submitted questions, so you guys thought about it, but it's so important, as we mentioned at the beginning, for the audience that's listening and engaging to kind of formulate their questions and ask about what's important to you as we go through this process. And continuing on that theme, and I'd like to go back to Rebecca on this, with what we've gone through in the last year, and I forget, yeah, actually I think it was you, Rebecca, that mentioned this pandemic and COVID has really introduced us to varieties of learning that some kids excel in and some kids don't. I mean, fortunately, my son, you know, I experienced, he did very well with the remote. My daughter, not so much. I mean, still are doing fine. And again, I credit that to Mahomet School District. But there are kids that are struggling, and we're seeing more D's and F's in the district than we have in past years. And we know that the kids are overwhelmed by falling behind. So kind of how would you address that, or what are your thoughts on addressing that? And also, I think the question that a lot of people want to know is, you know, do we see a 5-day school year next year? You know, but how do we bring those kids back emotionally? And does that include going back to school 5 days a week?
Yeah, I think this is a really good point to bring in the fact that, you know, we are going to have a lot of patience and tolerance and desire to, again, meet kids where they are. I think it's going to be especially hard moving forward because we're going to have some kids who are academically behind. We're going to have some kids who are emotionally traumatized. So I think that we have our work, certainly our teachers and our staff have their work cut out for them. I think looking at the curriculum to be able to be sure that we are listening super closely to students and following their progress and being able to isolate issues and problems as they come up. We may need to put in more staff and more support to be able to, again, provide tutoring, provide opportunities maybe through the summer. But I think that, again, there will be positive things that come out of this that teach us that all students are different in their learning process. And so I think that, the kids who are not excelling with virtual learning, I think that we need to identify those. And as far as 5 days a week next year, I hope so, because I think that we need to have our kids in school all the time, 5 days a week, as long as we can follow safe precautions and make sure that they have the most exposure to their teachers and their learning experiences that they're used to. Thank you.
All right, Justin, we're going to go to you next. And since these are the questions that are coming in, you don't have them written down, so please let me know if you need me to repeat the question. I actually have them written down, so.
Okay, so, but yeah, with COVID, we've obviously opened avenues for different types of learning with the technology that we have. And I will say one thing, fortunately, we have technology in place in our school district to be able to do that remote learning. My family's personal experience was one where my kids kind of struggled with the e-learning. For one, we live in the country, so our internet situation is not good. Two, my kids need that social interaction at school. They need to have a more structured day. They need to be guided in what they do. They're not good self-learning, self-motivated kids, but they're still great kids. But to answer the question about 5-day-a-week school next year, I sure hope so as well. I mean, we need to get back to that. And as far as we don't know where the state's going to be with that, if they're going to mandate a remote learning option still or not, we'll have to address that when we find that out. But yes, my kids and my personal belief is we need to have the 5-day-a-week school. Thank you.
Laura?
I want to say thank you to our teachers, because I'm with Justin. I have 3 kids that really struggled with e-learning, and those teachers writing me and working with me. So thank you for supporting our kids and then supporting us in the midst of going through your own crisis. I want to address first, I thought I heard a component in the question, I hope I'm not way off base, just the psychological, emotional component that students are really struggling with, because there's also, academics, but it's true. I mean, us as adults, I know I even started going back to the office last week, and it just felt so strange, and I had to almost relearn, okay, how do I do this process in the day? And I'm an adult, and for the kids, they are also struggling too emotionally. They've had to go through different things that we never expected before. So what I would love to see in our school district is we have great social workers and great counselors who are there to support them, but per capita, per student, we just don't have enough. And so a lot of students, they'll try to get appointments and they just can't, because our amazing emotional support counselors, social workers, just can't keep up with the demand. So we really need to figure out a system to, as the social workers send out newsletters to provide parents with support. We just need more of this wonderful thing and talking about it and being patient with each other. Academically, I think we need to look around at the districts around us and the research that's coming out, articles that are coming out of the university, and really sit and hash through this. What is this going to look through the next stage for our students? So I think it's creative tutoring. I think it's working with parents. So I'm excited to see what the next step is, but we need to really crunch this together and not shy away from it.
Thank you. Sonny?
So the reality is that in our house, the one who liked remote learning the best was the teenager who didn't have to get dressed to go to school. The others were completely missing their friends and completely missing their teachers on days that they weren't there. But the reality is that this is not about me and it's not about my kids. I am very passionate, I hope you have heard this tonight, about our kids who are coming from low-income homes. We cannot assume that there are adults, loving adults at home to make grilled cheese sandwiches for lunch, have materials at the ready if they need remote learning materials, make sure that they're not also on YouTube while they're also on Google Meet. That doesn't happen in every home. And the reality is that in my world that I live in, on a day-to-day basis, I am watching 4th graders care for their younger siblings because their parents have to work all day. And when it comes to bringing our kids back to school 5 days a week, I am a 100% yes. That needs to happen. Our kids need to be back at school for so many reasons. We've already seen the academic slide from COVID. We've already heard that it's going to take several years to get these kids caught back up. Several years that some of our kids don't have. Our juniors and seniors in high school, let's hope the colleges remediate them. We don't even have that. So I really think that the sooner we can get our kids back in a system of learning, back in their social setting, we will start seeing those successes.
Thank you. Patrick.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement here that we're hoping and praying that we can go back to a 5-day school week next fall. As a parent, I would absolutely love that. I would say, kind of just share personal stories with my kids. My daughter, I think she could function fine. She did function fine with remote learning. My 5-year-old son is an absolute firecracker. He needs the structure that he craved, the structure, even what he was getting when he was half day during the fall. Now with being the full day, geez, thank goodness. I think that we are going to have to approach this issue long term. There is no quick fix to getting students caught up. Obviously, Sonny just hit the nail on the head. One of the most difficult things is that some kids are going to have longer time to get up to speed than others. I think having a more expansive offering for summer school education and instruction is a great start that the district has. That's going to have to continue. And I think the other folks on the board at the table have already identified that we're going to have to work with our support staff and our teachers to be creative in providing instruction that will likely need to go above and beyond what is obviously mandated by the curriculum, because these kids deserve as much. It is not their fault. It is nobody's fault that we are in this situation because of COVID, period.
Thank you. Max.
Sure, thanks, Stacy. Sonny nailed it, and I share her passion. We have to have kids back in our buildings 5 days a week. We've got to do that. For all the reasons she talked about, social, emotional reasons, academic reasons, just living their lives and normalcy in their lives, we need to get that accomplished. Certainly, we're going to have some issues with learning recovery. The district is working right now to address that. Dr. Romo is working with teachers and staff to put plans in place. There's things we're going to be able to do in classrooms to kind of help bring some of that back. And as we talked about the other night at our board meeting, we're going to have enhanced summer school options this year to try to help some of our students recover some of the information that they need. It's not going to be a quick fix. The younger kids we've learned over the years to maybe catch up a little quicker. Where I'm concerned about all of them, but the older kids we don't have much time with. They're going off to college. But we're going to do our best to work at all grade levels and to try to get kids caught back up. And I just appreciate right now that our staff is already working on this. There's already thought and plans going into this. And, we're in Mahomet, we always look for ways to get it done, right? And that's what we're going to do. We're going to look, our teachers are great, our staff's great, and we're going to figure it out. And we're going to try to get kids back up to speed.
Thank you. So, as any school board member has to contend with, there's the financial issues. Throughout this pandemic and more recently with the perspectives of the $1.9 billion referendum going through Congress, we don't know if we're going to be getting more money, less money, or how that's going to play out. But as a board member, what's your top financial priority, and how are you going to use tax dollars most wisely? I'd like to start with Patrick. You can take a moment. I didn't mean to put you on the spot there.
Well, I think that one of the primary responsibilities of a school board is obviously to be the custodian of the purse, so to speak, right? I think that there is widespread uncertainty. At least now we know from the state that the the budget for 2021 is going to be flat, right? So we can't actually rely on any increase there. I think it's going to require, lo and behold, working together as a board, working together with the administration, working together with the chief business officer to actually prioritize what needs to be done. I think we're going to have to do some serious scenario planning to lay out what is possible based on numbers that do come in with respect to different revenue streams. But in terms of priorities, I think the priorities should be looking at the students. We should actually seriously look at, and this touches on the question that we just had, what can we do as a district to put our tax dollars at work to commit to readying our students, to getting them back up to speed after a year of lost opportunity for a situation that is completely not their own doing.
Max?
Well, I think our first priority as we try to figure this out is we don't want to go backwards. Okay? We had, I've been through a couple financial crises now and changes in state funding, and we always have people that want to just, you know, all of a sudden we need to cut everything and downsize staff, and all of a sudden we're going backwards, and our students don't need us going backwards. The second priority I think we have to look at is, I always have lived by the philosophy we need to keep the dollars as close to the students as possible. Okay? That's one reason our facilities have always lagged, because classroom teachers are more important than facilities. Oftentimes, supplies and some of the textbooks and some of those types of things are more important than the facilities. So try to spend the dollars we have as close to the students as possible. You know, we have the lowest tax rate almost in the county. We're one of the bottom 3 out of, what, 12 or 13 school districts. Okay? We spend the lowest percent on education. As a community, long-term, we need to look at that. And probably the first chance we'll have to look at that will be when the community group comes back to us with recommendations on what to do with the junior high. But in the meantime, I think we have to choose carefully. I think you don't do anything sudden. I've never been one to want to panic right out of the gate. We just have to look it square in the eye, prioritize, figure it out, and work our way through it.
Thank you. Laura?
What I love about finances is the numbers don't lie. You know, you can argue over differences of opinions or ideas, but when you look at financial numbers, it's hard to argue with them because they're very black and white. That being said, like Max is saying, there's no need to be afraid of it. When you're running a district of this size, or really any business, there's some sort of risk involved. And it's understanding how to use that risk, how to use that money to the benefit. And in this case, it's the benefit of the students, right? And you know, as Patrick was saying, we are really stewards. The board is really charged with representing constituents, taxpayers, and using the money as wisely as possible. And so I've been so grateful that our district keeps the money as close to the students as possible. And I don't know entirely. I would love to sit with our chief financial officer and the rest of the board and really ask a lot of questions and throw out different ideas. But I would suspect one of the top priorities is going to be facilities at this point, because students, you know, when I meet with them, say, you know, we're sitting on the floor at the high school because there's not enough furniture because it was redistributed, another story. But teachers are crying out and saying, I don't have enough room in my class, I have to redistribute. So I think at this point, that has to be one of our top priorities.
Sonny?
I want to touch on what Laura just said. Our chief school business officer Heather Smith, if you've never had a chance to talk with her or sit with her or even have a phone call with her, she's phenomenal. She has a really nice way of explaining things, and I have a little bit of background in educational administration, so the school finance part isn't completely foreign to me, but it's sometimes really hard to understand, especially if you don't have an understanding of how there are certain buckets for funds, and funds have to be used in a certain way. She's phenomenal at helping just anybody understand what actually happens with school finances. So I would trust her to come to us and say, here are some things that we really need to consider financially, and here are some things that we don't need to worry about as much. You know, for example, she was projecting that we would have a 20% drop in sales tax revenue, and it's actually only been something like 7%. So we're in a much better position than what we even predicted ourselves to be. I agree with everybody that the #1 priority with spending in our district needs to be what is going to serve our students best. I had the very unique privilege of having a class size of 18 first graders during my first year of teaching, and that was due to a grant that came from the federal government. It disappeared after a couple of years, but it is unbelievably different teaching 18 first graders compared to teaching 23 first graders, or 28 fifth graders, who are a little stinkier than first graders. So when you are looking at where we can put our money, if we can start looking closely at what we can do to those class sizes, that would be my priority.
Thank you. Rebecca.
Yes, and I am not going to pretend to know nearly as much about this as Max does, because he's lived it, and I have no doubt that he has done his best to be a good steward of the money that we have. I do have some questions about our finances, and I think many people I've talked to in the district also have those questions. You know, I think this is probably, if not the hardest, certainly one of the hardest things that you're held accountable for on the school board. And so I think that something that I noticed in looking and studying some of the data and statistics is that if we are not the lowest, we're one of the lowest, maybe the second lowest, in terms of per student funding that we provide for our students in their education. So I would like to understand that and why that is. I mean, I know that we don't want to raise taxes, so I'm sure that they go hand in hand. I also, there are some red flags though that I wonder about, and I want to know more about. Like when I looked at the average of the last 5 years, we've averaged negative $500,000 in the financial report at the end of the year compared to our budget. And so I want to understand that. ISBE had us early warning for 2 years, and now they have us on watch. Again, Heather she tried desperately to explain that, and it's hard to hear over online. So I want to have a better understanding of why we are sitting there. And I guess lastly, I think we need to look at this as from a long-term plan perspective, and try to figure out why, we've got a budget that's second to only Champaign and Urbana in this school, in the county, and we've got to figure out how to spend those dollars as wisely as we can, and definitely class size, and, trying to make sure that as much money gets to the students as possible is critical, and that they would be my priority.
Thank you. Justin.
Yes, absolutely. I'll agree with the students have to be our top priority with our dollars that we have. I'll say that Mahomet-Seymour has a history of having outstanding financial management from the dollars that we've had to work with. We've had to get creative sometimes, and I think it's turned out for the best a lot of those times. We can't always count on the state funding that we're owed. And like Heather did a really good job explaining it the other night. I was very impressed with how she explained that, and I definitely want to have more conversations with her to help me understand better how school finances work. It's obviously different than a family's budget and finances that they get to work with. You're pulling money from different pots, and some can be spent in some areas and can't be spent in other areas. So definitely would like to get with her on some of those issues. Bottom line, we just have to figure out to manage our money the best way that we can with what we're working with. So keeping the students at the focus is there again, what we're here for. So thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Wow. I really appreciate all the comments that are coming in. I love the engagement because it means so much to know that our community is so involved, but that's what makes our community a special community. We could go on for another hour if we had to, quite easily, but I don't want to keep anyone that long. So we'd like to give each of our candidates an opportunity to present a closing statement or kind of share their closing thoughts based on what we talked about tonight and just their thoughts on the school district. And the school board and what they bring to the table. So I'd like to start with Patrick McKay.
So first, thank you very much once again for organizing this forum. Thank you to everyone that has participated with questions or is online watching us right now. Please continue to ask all of us questions. Please continue to challenge us. Become an informed voter. And more importantly, get out to vote on April 6th if you haven't already voted. Please do so. So I've mentioned time and again that there's going to be some very important issues that the school board needs to tackle during the next term. And I fundamentally believe that you as voters, it is your expectation that we work together to tackle those issues, that we find common ground, that we compromise to get things done. I pledge to you to find that common ground. I pledge to you to compromise. I pledge to you to be independent. I guarantee that I will always vote with my conscience, but I will explain to each of you why I have voted a certain way after doing so, because you deserve as much. I will be available, be it at Whisk, which I love, be it at Yo-Yo's, great smoothies, be it at Monocle's Pizza, or even be it online. I will be available because, once again, you deserve as much. We are doing great things across the district, and we will continue to do great things across the district. But imagine what we could do if we work together. I will be honored to have your vote. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Patrick. Justin Lamb.
Thank you, Stacy. Yes, I'll reiterate what Patrick said about working together. Mahomet is an outstanding community that we have here. I am very proud to live here and call it home. We can be better. We can be so much better. And we all need to work together. Ask me questions. I'm here. I'm available on Facebook, email, text, whatever. Meet you anywhere. I'm just honored to be in the position to help serve our community and have the opportunity to do that. I love our community. I love everybody in it, and I want the absolute best for everybody that lives here as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Laura?
Yeah, I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to the community, because this is really a role of service that we come into. This is a role of giving of oneself for the students, for the teachers. This isn't a next step on the corporate ladder. This is the next step of servant leadership. And so I'm really excited to have the opportunity to do this. Thank you for the community who's taken the time to tell their personal stories, to meet with me, to share the things that they think are phenomenal and the things that really need a little bit of work. So you will find in me someone who's ready to listen, someone who is ready to think about my preconceived notions and, stick with the wonderful things that we have and are supported in traditional, but also the things that really need to be reassessed, where we can grow. That's a value I learned here at Mahomet. You will find in me a person who is willing to do the research, to build consensus. I'm excited to see what the future has for our schools. So please, like the other side, please reach out. I love that we're all able to chat, meet together in different places. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Laura. Sonny Mcmurray?
I just want to say this was really fun, you guys. We should do this more often. I actually want to say thank you to everybody. Again, thank you to all of you for tuning in or watching the recording. I would really be honored to serve in this capacity purely because of my passion for public education. It's a perspective that is sometimes missing from the board table, and I want to make sure that we're not asking the impossible of our teachers and our staff. So to have some different perspectives at the table is never a bad thing. I want to actually make sure that everybody knows when it comes to election day on April 6th, check your polling place on the Champaign County Clerk's website. Several polling places have been consolidated, so make sure you get in there and figure out where your polling place is going to be. So for example, my polling place I think I'm Mahomet 1. Am I Mahomet 1? I was supposed to be at the community center. Our polling place is now going to be at Lake of the Woods Elks Pavilion. You can also vote early here in Mahomet, and you can also go out to Urbana at the Brookins if you want to vote early out there. But again, I want to encourage all of you, please reach out. Every Friday, I really pay attention to my personal or my school board Facebook page. I don't get to do social media during the day because I'm supposed to be teaching, so that's technically blocked from our school. So I will absolutely get back to you if you ever reach out to me, but it probably will not be between the hours of about 7 and 4. If you have questions and want to chat by phone or chat at any of these great local establishments that have been mentioned, I'd be happy to do that as well. So thank you again for all of your involvement with all of this. This is really powerful to live in a community that cares so much about our schools.
Rebecca.
Yes, I also want to thank the Chamber for hosting us and my fellow candidates. I think Mahomet really can't lose with anyone. I think we are all willing to serve, and we will bring the best part of ourselves to that boardroom, and so I think that will be a strength for the outcome of this election. My priorities are, I want to make sure that we narrow that achievement gap. I think all students deserve and we are obligated to give them a good education, the best education that we possibly can. I also want to give teachers and staff a bigger voice. I think I want to be a really intense listener when it comes to input from teachers and staff. I think we have a tendency to both honor them, but also kind of not listen to them sometimes because what they bring to us is difficult and hard. So I would like to have teachers have a bigger voice and bigger ears in the boardroom for listening. I also want to bring, I want to strengthen the board process. I think we can do better. As Max said before, we aren't broke. I agree, we're not broken. I just believe that we can do better. And so I would just ask voters to consider these questions. During the current, as you're watching board meetings now, do you feel good about the communication between the school, the teachers, the public, and all the stakeholders? Do you believe that the leadership is building board consensus? Do you believe that there's a respect and an agreed upon rule of order for the meetings? And also, do you believe that finances and the state of the district is good and secure for the years to come, based on and also considering all the things that we have to deal with coming up that are going to cost a lot of money? So I would ask the voters to think about those questions when they decide how they're going to vote. And I think there's a clear choice between what's going on now, the status quo, and what we might bring as change to the table. Thank you.
And Max McComb.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the Chamber again for putting this on, Walter and the staff for all their work, Stacy for leading us through and being our tour guide tonight, and Matt DeFanis, our technical wizard, who's making this all come to life out there in the comfort of your own home or wherever you may be. For the last 14 years, I've done my absolute best to help shape our school district, and currently we're considered one of the best districts in the state. We've always been good. We've celebrated many successes together, and we've learned and grown from some failures. It's been noted tonight that there's a divide in our community. I see that divide as a difference of opinion, not just on who we are as a district, but where we need to go. I believe we're not just a great district, but I believe we are outstanding, mostly because of our people. Many of you either moved to Mahomet or opted to stay here, and you also agree that we're an outstanding district. I recognize there's areas we need to improve. We're not going to shy away from those. I'm ready to help tackle those challenges. There are others who believe that our district is riddled with problems and needs to be reimagined from the ground up. They're quick to point out our flaws. They feel those flaws define us. I believe that Mahomet-Seymour schools receive well-deserved accolades because we don't dwell on those flaws. We work together to fix them, and we work together to get better. To me, the choice is very clear. If you still believe in the district that you moved here for or stayed here for, I'm the person who shares your beliefs and deserves your vote. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
I want to say thank you very much to all of the candidates that participated tonight. I think we all learned a great deal, and I think Max said it wonderfully. 18 years ago, we moved here because of the schools, and I don't regret it. I have two wonderful kids that went through this school system and now are excelling, and I look forward to them doing great things. I've seen hundreds of kids go through this school and do wonderful things, and it's in large part due to the school board. So please do your part in supporting this school district, whether you've had a good experience or otherwise. It's all that more important to get out and vote. April 6th? April 6th, or there's a lot of places you can vote early. But thank you again. The first step was participating with us tonight. We got a lot of participation. If you have any questions about how to reach the candidates, I'm sure that our chamber office can help you with that by reaching out either via email or calling the chamber office. But with that said, I'm Stacy LaCour with Mahomet Area Chamber of Commerce, and I thank you. Have a great night.